companies are being acquired by the merchant acquirers. We've seen that happen in the past. In my opinion, acquirers will they will develop a new business model besides acquiring that will be very focused on being a software reseller. So they will be reselling software to their merchants. And this is very lucrative for them. As merchants want more and more power, they need more software to be able to do more. And the acquirer is the perfect vehicle to provide them with that software. They're already providing them with the acquiring service. Why not providing with the software? And companies have indicated this. If Elevon, as an example, in the U.S. has been very clear that their focus is to become an ISV and to develop an entire business from selling software.
Right. Why don't we do the same now with an online transaction? So
sorry.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Just one follow-up question to really make sure I understand this topic, 100%. So when you say PSP, a payment service provider, you say it's basically an acquirer that's also offering, software and additional services. Now, that means that every single PSP does offer acquiring services. So it is ultimately so the customers are ultimately merchants. It's not just providing software to maybe even a merchant acquirer that can then use that software to bundle it with its own products and then give it to the customer, right? Because the reason I'm asking is because merchant acquiring, that also involves taking on the merchant risk, right?
That's
just wanted
correct.
to get a clear understanding of what a PSP is. So a PSP, by definition, also takes on the merchant risk.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, ultimately, the merchant risk has been shifted. So if you are an EMV compliant merchant and you have a device that's EMV compliant, in theory, you are the one that's running the risk. So the liability has been pushed. Here in the U.S., there's been a liability shift. The liability has been moved to the merchant if the merchant complies with an EMV solution. If he does not have an EMV solution, then he's liable for the transaction. If he has an EMV solution, then the merchant acquires liable for the transaction.
Right.
Maybe actually before moving to the online world, can you please provide us an overview of the main players for each of the acquirer and the processing player, and together for the offline world in the main regions?
Yeah, if you look at card not present, it varies greatly around the world. So first we start with what are called the cross-border, the acquirers that are capable of cross-border, the ability to do cross-border acquiring. And, there you have Global Collect, which is owned by Ingenico. You have WorldPay, which is now part of it.
Before, how cross-border acquiring differs from normal acquiring?
Sure. So it's a good example is the Nike shop. So Nike is a U.S.-based company, but they operate e-commerce around the world. So if I'm a customer in France and I decide to buy a pair of sneakers from Nike online, I go online to the Nike website and I enter my card number. That transaction then is received by Nike's cross-border acquirer, which in this case is Global Collect. Global Collect receives that transaction, and instead of routing it to a bank in the U.S., they will route it locally to an acquiring bank that they have a partnership with in France. If it's a French card, they route it there because usually they will get better rates from a local acquirer than they would from an international acquirer. So they'll route it to a local, to BNP Paribas, as an example. They will process it locally, and then they will send the authorization. Then on top of that, they do the settlement of the transaction with BNP Paribas. They receive the funds, and then they transfer those funds back to Nike in the U.S. That's what we call cross-border acquiring. So they're acquiring transactions in one country, but then they're settling them back with the merchant in a different country. So today, Global Collect has that capability.